You know that feeling, right? Like when your phone buzzes for the seventh time in, I don't know, 10 minutes, and you just reach for it without even thinking.
Yeah, completely on autopilot.
Exactly. Not because you're expecting anything important or like someone's in trouble. It's just because the silence between those notifications has started to feel a little too loud.
Right.
It starts to feel uncomfortable, like it's watching you, like it's waiting.
It's a very specific, heavy kind of quiet. The kind that makes you want to just crawl right out of your own skin if you sit in it for too long.
Yes. And so you scroll, you
Yeah.
tap, you reply with a heart emoji that you don't even really feel.
Mm.
You're washing the dishes while half listening to a deep dive, maybe even this one and half planning tomorrow's emails, all just to keep the cognitive load high enough to avoid that quiet. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Thank you.
We are exploring a phenomenon that touches pretty much all of us, which is why we instinctively run from stillness.
And, the mission here today is really to fundamentally change how we relate to that discomfort. We're going to explore why our nervous systems actually fear stillness.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
It is. We're going to look at how we constantly interrupt our own internal processing. What in my work as a Gestalt therapist we call the contact cycle. And ultimately, how we can finally meet those unspoken parts of ourselves without treating them like, problems to be fixed.
Before we really get into it, though, I think we need to clarify some terminology. Because a lot of people hear the word Gestalt and they immediately think of, like, optical illusions or graphic design principles.
Right, the faces or the V's illusion.
Exactly, like how the brain perceives a whole image rather than just its parts. What does Gestalt actually mean in a therapeutic context?
That's a crucial distinction. In psychology, traditional psychoanalysis, think Freud, is often focused on digging into your past to find out why you are the way you are. Gestalt therapy, on the other hand, is radically focused on the present, the here and now. It's less interested in why your childhood made you anxious, and much more interested in how you are physically and emotionally organizing your experience in this exact second.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like, how are you breathing? Where's the tension in your body? How are you making contact with your environment right now?
So it's less about the origin story and more about the real-time mechanics of being alive.
Exactly.
Which makes a lot of sense when we look at our modern habit of drowning out our inner voice. Like you tell yourself you're super connected because you've been on Slack and texting all day.
Yeah.
But late at night when the screen finally goes dark, there's this whisper from somewhere deep inside that just says, "You haven't listened to me all day."
And we panic when we hear that whisper. We really do. Keeping the noise going isn't an act of malice against ourselves, It's a survival mechanism. Our nervous systems have actually learned to interpret stillness as a threat.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because calling stillness a threat sounds, kind of extreme.
Sure.
Is it really a profound survival mechanism, or are we just dealing with modern dopamine addiction? Like, we treat our inner silence like a software update pop-up on our laptops.
Oh, I love that.
Right, we just keep hitting remind me tomorrow because we don't want to wait the 20 minutes for it to install.
That is a great analogy. The dopamine loop of our devices is definitely the vehicle, but the avoidance goes so much deeper than just craving a screen.
How so?
Well, why do we keep hitting remind me tomorrow on that inner update? Because in stillness, memories surface, regrets echo, unfinished emotional business stirs.
Wow.
Yeah. When you stop moving, everything you've been outrunning finally has the space to catch up to you.
So our modern connectedness is often just a highly sophisticated avoiding strategy. We curate these outer expressions of productivity to basically starve our inner life.
Right, hoping that if we're just busy enough, we won't have to face the messy, raw reality of being human.
That is heavy.
The problem with that strategy is that the most important parts of us, they don't shout to get our attention. They wait.
They wait.
They wait in the pause between breaths. They wait in that tiny hesitation before you say yes to a favor when your whole body is actually screaming no.
Oh man, yeah.
If avoidance is our default survival strategy, Gestalt therapy offers a very specific antidote. It's a concept called contact.
So if avoidance is the problem, what does contact actually look like in practice? Because it sounds less like speaking or analyzing and more like a kind of surrender.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Think about the last time you sat with a friend who was deeply hurting. Did you just sit there and let them cry? Or did you feel this overwhelming urge to jump in and say, hey, it's going to be okay, or look on the bright side before they even finish trembling?
Oh, I'm absolutely guilty of jumping in.
We all are.
The discomfort of watching someone I care about in pain makes me want to resolve it immediately. I want to fix it so I don't have to feel uncomfortable anymore.
Exactly. And we do the exact same thing to ourselves.
Wow. The moment an uncomfortable internal feeling arises, like a pang of grief, a flicker of doubt, a quiet loneliness, we rush to resolve it. We distract, we numb, we rationalize. Or we use what psychology calls spiritual bypassing.
Let's define that for the listener, because spiritual bypassing is a term that gets thrown around in wellness circles a lot. Are we talking about toxic positivity here?
Pretty much, yeah.
Like when you get passed over for a promotion and you feel totally gutted, but you immediately force yourself to list 3 things you are grateful for, essentially gaslighting your own bad mood.
That is the perfect example. Spiritual bypassing is using spiritual wellness concepts to sidestep uncomfortable emotions.
Right.
You tell yourself, I shouldn't be angry, I should be grateful. You are trying to bypass the pain to get to the enlightened state. But by doing that, you cut off contact with your actual lived experience. You rush to say, it'll be okay, before you've even let yourself feel the hurt.
So if rushing to fix the feeling or bypassing it with gratitude is the wrong move, what is the alternative? The alternative is a practice we call phenomenological awareness.
Phenomenological awareness, that is quite the mouthful.
I know, it's a big word, but the concept is actually incredibly grounding. It is the radical act of noticing what is actually happening in your body and your emotions right now without any interpretation.
Okay, without interpretation.
Right. So instead of jumping to a conclusion and saying, I'm having anxiety, it's noticing my chest is tight, my jaw is clenched, and there's a fluttering under my ribs. You are describing what is without overlaying any meaning or diagnosis onto it.
So it's almost like becoming a biological reporter rather than a doctor. I'm just listing the physical symptoms. Tight chest, shallow breath, without trying to write a prescription.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting. You have to push back on this a little. Isn't human nature wired to interpret?
We certainly try to.
Right, because we are taught that naming our emotions gives us power over them. If I feel a tight chest and my brain diagnoses it as anxiety, I can immediately deploy my anxiety management tools. I can do my breathing exercises. Why is solving it the wrong move?
Because the issue with immediately jumping to a clinical diagnosis like anxiety is that it often shuts down the conversation. Once you label it a problem to be fixed, you stop listening to what the sensation's actually trying to tell you. In Gestalt, the belief is that silence doesn't speak in neat diagnostic categories. It speaks in metaphors.
Metaphors like what?
A locked door, a foggy window, a hollow space in the stomach. These sensations, they don't hand you easy answers. They ask questions.
Like what kind of questions?
Things like, what are you avoiding? Or who are you pretending not to be? When you rush to therapize your feelings and deploy your management tools, you are treating your inner life like a symptom to be eradicated. You optimize it away.
Wow. We turn our own inner life into a bug in the code that needs to be patched, rather than a message to be understood.
And when you treat yourself that way, your true self doesn't just disappear. It withdraws, it fragments.
That sounds dangerous.
It is. If you ignore it long enough, that ignored self starts speaking through symptoms you physically cannot ignore. Burnout, insomnia, chronic irritability, or just that persistent gray sense of meh that so many people walk around with.
It's wild to think about that persistent sense of, not as a lack of energy, but as a fragmented part of myself desperately trying to get my attention.
Right.
So if these feelings are trying to communicate with us, how exactly do we block them? How does the mind actually pull off this trick of ignoring itself?
This is where we get to the core mechanics of Gestalt therapy. We use a framework called the contact cycle.
Okay.
It maps the natural flow of any human experience. When this cycle flows freely, we feel alive and integrated. When it's interrupted, we feel that numbness or burnout.
I think we need to walk through this contact cycle step by step. Let's start with something purely physical so we can see the mechanism clearly. Let's use hunger. How does hunger move through this cycle?
Great example. So the cycle has 7 stages. It starts with sensation. In the case of hunger, it's just a physical rumble in your stomach.
Okay, sensation, rumble in the stomach.
Next is awareness. This is the cognitive realization, oh, I'm hungry. Then comes mobilization. Your brain starts scanning for options, gathering energy to solve the need. You think, what's in the fridge?
Sensation, awareness, mobilization. Then we actually do something about it.
Right, the 4th step is action. You walk to the kitchen and make a sandwich. The fifth step is the crucial one, which is contact.
Contact.
Yes, you actually eat the sandwich, you are fully engaged in filling the need.
And after contact.
Satisfaction. You feel full, the need is met, which naturally leads to the final step, withdrawal. The hunger fades into the background, your energy settles, and you move on to the next experience.
That is a complete, uninterrupted wave.
Exactly. Sensation, awareness, mobilization, action, contact, satisfaction, withdrawal.
That makes perfect sense for a sandwich. But we aren't talking about sandwiches, we're talking about emotional survival. How does this cycle apply to that quiet whisper, late at night? Where do we derail?
With emotional needs, we almost always get stuck right at the beginning in the gap between sensation and awareness.
Interesting.
Let's map it. You feel a flutter in your chest or a tightness in your throat. That is the sensation. But instead of letting it reach true awareness, you intercept it. You hijack the cycle.
Give me an example of hijacking it.
You feel that chest flutter. And instead of letting yourself realize, oh, I am deeply lonely, you immediately name it stress from work.
Oh, wow.
You feel tension in your jaw, but you call it tiredness. Instead of acknowledging, I'm holding back words I really need to say to my partner. You mislabel the sensation so you don't have to deal with the true awareness.
So if I'm picturing this mechanically, it's like a stalled car engine.
Okay.
You've got the spark, which is the sensation in the body, and you've got the fuel. But because you intercepted the awareness, the transmission is broken. The energy can't move into mobilization or action. It doesn't go anywhere. It just pools, stagnates, and the engine starts to shake.
The energy pools. And that shaking engine is the perfect metaphor for the background hum of low-grade anxiety we live with. The energy of the unmet need has nowhere to go, so it just vibrates inside you.
You end up living beside yourself instead of within yourself, which highlights this incredible paradox. We think that avoiding the silence, numbing out with our phones or busyness, is protecting us from pain.
Right.
But the numbness is actually the barrier to real safety. Because true safety isn't the absence of uncomfortable feelings, it's the presence of contact with yourself.
Beautifully said. And if that energy is just pooling like a stalled engine, it eventually forces its way out in distorted ways.
Like how?
This is where we see projection. When we absolutely cannot tolerate our own unmet longings, we start to place them outside of ourselves.
Projection. Like getting mad at a coworker for being hypercritical when really you are the one constantly criticizing yourself.
Yes, or even more broadly, it shows up in how we interact with the world.
Yeah.
We claim no one understands me or people just don't care. We demand that our partners or friends anticipate our needs.
Right.
But if you strip away the projection and look at the interrupted contact cycle, the deeper, far more uncomfortable reality is usually, I haven't understood myself. I haven't cared for myself.
Woof, I haven't understood myself. That hits close to home. Instead of facing our own internal silence, we demand the external world cater to a feeling we refuse to even name.
It's easier to blame the world than to sit with the tightness in your own chest.
It really is.
But Gestalt therapy asks us to shift how we view our role in this. It asks us to move from responsibility, which often feels like blame, as in I should be better at this, to responsibility.
Responsibility, like the literal ability to respond.
Exactly. The ability to respond to what is alive in you right now without rushing to fix it. Just saying, I notice this tightness in my chest. I can respond to it simply by being with it.
Which brings us to the actual physical practice of this.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for us to sit here on a deep dive and talk theoretically about the contact cycle and phenomenological awareness.
Sure.
It's an entirely different beast when it's 11 p.m., you're exhausted, the house is quiet, and the urge to just numb out on TikTok is overwhelming. How do we actually make contact? I've heard it described as an exhale, a returning home.
If you can resist the urge to grab the phone, there's a distinct moment right before you make true contact with yourself.
What does it feel like?
It feels like a falling sensation, not a violent fall, but the kind of falling that releases you. It happens the moment you finally stop explaining yourself, the moment you stop curating your inner world for an audience that doesn't actually exist.
That is such a profound way to frame it, curating for an audience that doesn't exist. We perform our own wellness for ourselves. We try to be good at feeling our feelings.
We do. But if you let the silence stretch just a little bit longer past that discomfort, something inside you finally exhales. You drop the performance.
But what happens to all the dark stuff in that exhale? All that unfinished business we've been running from, the regrets, the grief, does it just vanish once you face it? Because that sounds a bit too magical.
It is not magical, and no, they don't vanish. A big myth in the wellness industry is that you can just cleanse yourself of your past or detox your negative emotions.
Right.
In my practice, the goal is never eradication. The goal is integration.
Integration meaning the feelings stay, but their nature changes.
Yes. The unspoken words don't need to be shouted from the rooftops. They just need to be felt. The silenced, messy parts of you don't actually want to take over your whole personality.
They don't.
No, they don't want to ruin your life. They just want to belong. They want to be brought back into the fold of your awareness.
So how do we physically do that? How do we invite them back without getting totally overwhelmed?
There's a beautifully simple, grounding physical practice for this. You can do it sitting up or lying down. You close your eyes, you place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly.
Hand on heart, hand on belly. Grounding the sensation.
Exactly. And you bring your phenomenological awareness to your breathing. You breathe into the literal physical space in your torso, between your hands, where so much of our emotional truth is stored.
Okay.
And then you ask yourself softly, what have I been too afraid to hear?
What have I been too afraid to hear? That is a heavy question to drop into the silence.
It is. And the rule is you don't force an answer. You
Yeah.
don't try to therapize whatever comes up into a neat little lesson for your journal. You just listen.
Just listen.
Maybe what surfaces is a memory of someone let you down. Maybe it's the raw vulnerability of wanting to be loved. Maybe it's just a blunt truth like, I've been lonely even when I'm surrounded by people.
You just let it exist in the light of your awareness. You don't interrupt the cycle.
You don't interrupt. And then comes the final crucial step of the practice.
Which is,
once you feel that sensation, you say to that feeling, to that neglected part of yourself, thank you for waiting.
wow, thank you for waiting. That phrasing is incredibly moving.
It's powerful.
It acknowledges that a piece of you has essentially been locked in the waiting room of your own mind, maybe for years, just hoping you'd eventually call its name.
Exactly.
But as beautiful as that is, I can already see a trap here.
What's the trap?
If we do this and we feel that profound exhale, how do we stop ourselves from turning this into just another wellness performance? Like, look at me, doing my phenomenological awareness breathing, thanking my inner child, I'm so healed.
Oh, turning awareness into an aesthetic is the ultimate modern trap. We weaponize therapy concepts to avoid actually doing the hard things.
Right, so how do we avoid that?
Hearing yourself is only the first step.
Yeah.
The real work, the work that cannot be faked or performed for an Instagram graphic, is trusting what you hear and letting it dictate your actions in the real world.
Meaning the internal listening actually has to translate into external boundaries. It has to change the way you live.
Yes. Because once you finally let that true voice complete the contact cycle and reach your awareness, you can't unhear it. And it is going to ask you to live differently.
So if that tightness in your chest is actually deep resentment about how you are treated at work,
Trusting that voice means you have to set a boundary tomorrow. It might ask you to say no to a family member when you're usually people pleasers and say yes.
it might demand that you reach out and risk rejection when you're lonely instead of safely isolating with Netflix.
Right. The transformation doesn't happen in the quiet, peaceful moments of meditation. It happens in the messy, uncomfortable, everyday choices that follow the meditation. It happens in the living.
So the voice of silence isn't a coach pushing you to become someone new. It's not a self-improvement project to make you more productive.
No, not at all.
It's simply an invitation back to the person you've always been. The person who's just been buried under layers of notifications and noise.
It's an opening. You don't need to fill the silence with answers or immediate solutions. You only need to trust that if you sit in it long enough, it holds what you've been searching for.
Which brings us back to you, the person listening right now. Tomorrow, or maybe even tonight, when the dishwasher is empty, the screen goes dark, and that stillness settles in, when your hand reflexively reaches for your phone to start the avoidance cycle all over again, pause.
Just for a moment.
Just for one breath. Hand on your chest, and ask yourself, what am I avoiding feeling right now?
And as you sit with whatever answers that question, consider this final thought. We've talked about how ignoring your internal voice causes it to pool up and speak through physical and emotional symptoms. The chronic exhaustion, the short temper, that persistent numbness. What if all those symptoms are not character flaws or medical mysteries? What if they are actually just neglected parts of you, desperately trying to communicate a boundary that needs to be drawn? If you were to truly surrender to the silence tonight and genuinely listen to those neglected parts, what completely practical, everyday boundary in your life would you be forced to change tomorrow morning?
What an intimidating, beautiful question. Think about that the next time the house gets quiet. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time.